Welcome back everybody to video number 3 in our series on making a brick breaker game. This is Mike Page with scriptingisfun.com. In the last video we were able to get our ball bouncing off of everything, and we also put in the functionality where if it went off the bottom of the screen it would go back to the paddle, follow it around, and wait for us to push the spacebar to launch it again. In this video we're going to add in the bricks. Now that we have this ball here, we want it to have something to break. So let's work on making our bricks in this game. Let's go ahead and jump right in and get started. So the first thing we're going to need is a brick on the screen. So in Photoshop I made these brick sprites, and basically it's just a white rectangle with a bit of a stroke around it. So a purple line or a blue line or a kind of a goldish yellow line around the outside. You can see here that they are 64 pixels by 32 pixels. So the first thing, once I brought these in, is I want to go here and make sure they're set as the sprite type. And then I want to set my pixels per unit to match the width of my brick. That way each brick will be exactly 1 unit wide, which will be very helpful for laying out the bricks in our project. So I'm going to go here to pixels per unit and change that to 64 and hit apply. And I'm going to do that for all of my bricks. Matter of fact, I believe I can group select these since they're the same type and change them both to 64 at the same time and hit apply. Let's just double check that. Yes, so now they're all 64 pixels per unit. So that this tells Unity that 64 pixels on this sprite should be the size of a Unity unit. Alright, so let's just pick some bricks to bring in. Let's go ahead and bring these purple ones in. So these are sprites. If I drag one out into my scene here and drop it in, you'll see we have an instance of that sprite out here now. It's called Purple Brick, or Brick Purple. Let's just rename this to Brick for now. And what I'm going to want to do here is I want to change this white. Now I made these bricks with a white center so that I could go over here to the sprite renderer and the color bar, and now whatever color I drag it to, it's going to tint that sprite to that color. So since I want to preserve the purpley outside, I have to be careful how I mix this in, but I can actually kind of make a brighter purpley kind of a color here and just kind of get it where I want. Okay, so I wanted the bricks to have a bit of a darker border around it, but you got to be careful because as you mix colors, of course, it's also affecting that purple outside. So you want to try to kind of keep it in the purple realm here. Maybe we'll darken it down a bit. We want them to shine a little bit. Let's try something like that. So I'm going to get my color the way that I want it, and there we go. Now, I mean, of course, you could actually just make it the color you want inside of something like Photoshop, but this gives us the ability to do some coloring here inside the game engine. All right, so here's my brick. Now, my brick is going to need to know when it's been hit by the ball, and the ball also has to be able to bounce off of it. So the brick is going to need a collider. So let's go add component, physics 2D, box collider. Let's zoom in on this brick here, and let's go, yeah, we'll just leave that box collider right here around the very edges of my brick so it sized it appropriately. And then we've got our brick all set. We're also going to want to tag all our bricks with a custom tag. So let's go up to our tag manager here. Let's add a tag, hit the plus button to get another one, and let's just call this brick. We'll save that tag and we'll go back to our brick. We'll drop the tag selector open here and select that new tag brick. That way later on, if we need to know if the ball hit a brick or not, we can just check the tag of whatever it hit. So now we've got our brick sitting out here in the scene. Let's just see if the ball can bounce off of it. So when I hit play, go out here and line up with it, and there we go. So now the ball will collide with the brick. It will bounce off the brick, and that is just exactly the behavior that we want to have out of our brick here. All right, so I'm gonna make this brick now into a prefab. So you may have noticed that I put a few folders into my asset screen here. I made a folder for scripts, a folder for sprites. Let's make another folder for prefab. So if you don't know how to make a folder, you can either go up to Create and Folder, or you can right click on assets here and get create and folder. You can also just right click right here in the assets panel and do create and folder. So we'll make a folder, and let's just call this prefabs. And then I'm going to drag my brick from here into my prefab folder. This will make it a prefab. Prefab is, think of it as a master copy of an item that we want to have multiples of in our scene. And then if I change the master copy here, all the copies of it out in my scene will change to match it. And we can also instantiate or clone in some more of these as well. So I've got my one brick out here, and what we want now is more of these bricks. So we're just going to make a simple little level here for us to start working on. So one of the things you can do is get your first brick kind of where you want it to be. So let's just make this on an even number here. Let's see what a -5 is. Okay, so let's start a row of bricks over here at -5 on the X. And it doesn't matter, but let's go ahead and put this at 2 on the Y, just so we got some whole numbers. Now what we can do here is we can duplicate this brick. So I'm going to right click it and say duplicate. Now I have a copy. Now I want to pull this brick off, but I want it to line up exactly next to the other one. So instead of trying to do this by hand, let me go back here so that it's right back where it was. What we can do is we can actually snap it into place. So if I go to edit, I can get my snap settings. And I can tell it how many units on the X or the Y or the Z to move it when I snap it. So since I know these bricks are 1 unit wide, because that's how I set up the sprite, I can leave move X to 1, and then when I snap it over, it will go 1 unit over. So to snap, with your move tool selected, if you hold the control key down on your keyboard and you grab the arrow and pull, it'll snap over 1 unit. And then I can just duplicate again. So again, it's Control D is the keyboard shortcut, and I can snap. So I can just keep doing Control D and snapping bricks in here, and I can just build a whole row of bricks by doing Control D and then Control and dragging with my mouse to put it on there. I think 1 more is good. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now that I have a whole row of these, I can actually duplicate the whole row if I like. So I could do a Control D here, and then I could just slide it down on the Y. So these bricks were 32 high, which is half of 64, so they should be a half a unit high. So if I go back into my snap settings on the Y, I should be able to set this to a 0.5, and then if I grab this whole row of bricks I just made here. Let's see, I think I might have lost the ones I just made here. Let's shift down through. There we go. If I will control down now and drag on the Y, they'll snap down half a level. And it looks like I got 2 of these guys. Where did the last one go? There he is. So let's snap him back up. There we go. So now I got 2 rows of bricks. Now that we made all of our bricks out here, the next thing we want to do is we want to kind of have a way of getting these to where they're not taking up so much space in the hierarchy. So one of the things we do a lot when we get in this situation is we will just create an empty game object. Let's just call this our bricks. And let's make sure that we reset this empty game object to all zeros here. So you can just click the gear up here in the transform and hit reset. That'll put this at 0xyz, 0 rotation. So that puts it right in the middle of our scene. What I can then do is select all these bricks, clicking the first one, shift clicking the last one, and then drag it on top of that bricks empty game object. And now they become children of this object, and I can just tuck them away underneath there. So they're all inside of here, tucked away. I haven't moved their position or anything like that. So we have our bricks all laid out nicely next to each other, and we're ready to set up some interactivity between the bricks and the ball. So now that we have them here, when the ball hits the bricks, we want the bricks to break. We want them to go away. We want to score some points. and all of that good stuff. Let's set up the breaking of the bricks here first. So we're going to go to our ball script. In our ball script here, we have an onTriggerEnter function that runs whenever we hit a trigger collider. The bricks don't have a trigger collider. They actually have a non-trigger, just regular collider. So we're going to add another function here to our script that is called void on collision enter 2D. On collision enter 2D, and I have a typo here. Let me see, on collision enter 2D. There we go. This also needs to have an argument or a parameter here, and this takes in a collision. So we're going to put in a collision 2D, and again we can just call this other. Okay, so on collision enter 2D will run automatically whenever the ball that has the script hits another collider that is not a trigger, so a regular collider, and it will give us information about what it hit through the collision. So we'll have a reference to the thing that we collided with. So the first thing we want to do here is check to see if what we hit was a brick. And if you remember, we just tagged the brick with the brick tag. So we can just ask here if other. Now, if I say other.compare tag, it doesn't show up on the list. That's because a collision 2D does not have the compare tag method tied into it. So I actually have to go to a different part of the object. So from other, I can go to the transform. So other, go to the other's transform, and then compare tag should show up here. There it is. And I can ask for that brick tag. Alright, so if the thing we just collided with is tagged as a brick, for right now, let's just make that brick go away. So we would say destroy, and then inside of here we'll say other.gameObject. The destroy command always needs you to feed a game object into it, so I'm saying go to this other, this thing I just hit, and then get its game object. So go to its game object and destroy that. And then the destroy command will get rid of that brick and everything attached to it. So it should go out of the game. So let's save this. Let's go out into Unity and double check that everything is set up the way we want it on our bricks. So I'm just going to click into a brick here, and you notice it's got a box collider and it is tagged as the brick tag. So that should be good. Let's play, and when we hit a brick with the ball, it should go away. So there we go. So now every time I hit a brick with the ball, that brick is being destroyed and it's going away. Whoop, got in a little bit of trouble there. Okay, so that is now currently working. So now we have the ability for our bricks to be broken. Okay. All right, the next thing we might want to do is when we break these bricks, it would be kind of interesting if we had some sort of a particle effect that would go on there as well. So we could set up a particle effect on here and maybe tie in some scoring to it. So let's take a look at how we would set up a particle system for an explosion. So up here in my hierarchy, I'm going to create, and this is going to be under effects and particle system. So I'm just going to drop a particle system in here into the scene. This is the default particle system right here. In the hierarchy, you see all your particle system settings. So we're going to make a few changes here to give this the look that we want it to have. The first thing we're going to do is go down here to emission and click that bar, and we don't want this to emit particles over time. So I'm going to change that to a 0. We want it to do a burst. So here it says burst. Let's hit the plus sign to add a burst. So right now this is bursting 30 particles at the beginning of this particle system, and it's looping right now so that we can just kind of work on it. So that gets us a burst of particles. All right, so we're going to go ahead and close that one down. Let's now go look at the shape next. So right now you notice it's got a cylinder shape. It's shooting straight up into the air. We're kind of looking at it on edge. Let's actually change that from a cone. Let's make this a sphere. So now it's blasting these out from our sphere, and we want to pack that sphere a little tighter. So where it says radius here, we can actually just kind of drag that down to like a 0.1. That's going to cause all the particles to be generated from right here in the very center of that point. All right, and it's just going to push those out like that. Now this explosion is lasting kind of a long time, so let's go up here to duration, and let's turn this down to 2. This would be like 2 seconds. So every 2 seconds now it's going to burst, and these particles are sticking around for kind of a long time. So let's actually make sure these particles disappear a little quicker. So right here in start lifetime, this is how long they'll live in seconds. If I turn that down to a 1, you see how they go away in 1 second, they just pop out. Now it would be nice to have a little randomness in here, so let's hit the arrow over here, and we can give this a random between 2 constants. So maybe some of these particles only live for half a second, and maybe some of these live for as long as a second and a half. So now you see that the particles kind of blink out over time, and it's a little more organic looking. We can also look at the speed. They're kind of spraying out there kind of fast, so we could turn the speed down a little bit. That'll make them move slower. So maybe something like a 3, but again, we can drop the arrow and do a random between 2 constants. So maybe we do between like maybe a 2 and a 3. So now some will move a little faster than others, and we can tweak those as we need to, and that could be kind of fun. Okay, and then the next thing we might want to look at is we kind of want to make it look like this is little pieces of brick that are falling down. Right now we're using these real fuzzy kind of particles, which is fine, but we could go down here to the renderer and click on that, and instead of using a default particle here, we could click our little circle, and maybe we pick like a default sprite shape, which will put these little squares out here. So if we pick that, then what we can do is we can go up here to our start size. So we have start size of 1 right now. If we turn that down, these guys will get smaller. So we can turn this way down small if we want to. Now they're just tiny little particles, right, at a 0.05. So maybe those are a little too small. So maybe go up to something like a 0.2, and again we can do some randomness here if we want to, random between 2 constants, maybe a 0.2 and a 0.5. Oops, let's make that a 0.2 again. There we go. And I think maybe 0.5 might be a little too big, so let's take that down to maybe a 0.3. Let's see what that looks like. And maybe we'll put the bottom one down to a 0.1. We're just playing with this to get the kind of feel we want. So there's some small little chunks and some bigger chunks. Okay, now the next thing we might want to do is it might be kind of cool to simulate some gravity in here. So when we hit the particles, they don't just fly out like there's no gravity. So right here we have a gravity modifier. Let's put like maybe a 0.1 here. And you notice how they'll start to kind of fall. Let's turn that up a little bit. Let's try like a 0.2. So here now, see how they're kind of falling after a little bit? So they're kind of spraying out and falling. And these are getting a little bit far away. Like let's put this right over one of these bricks here. Let's imagine that we're going to drop one right here. So that might be spraying out a little too far and too fast. So again, we can play with our start speed. Let's maybe slow that down to a 1 to a 2. Okay, that's looking a little better. I might even go as low as a 0.5 and a 1. Let's see what that looks like. There. Okay, so now it looks like the brick might be being hit, and then the pieces are just kind of falling down the screen. So I like how that's looking. We can also pick a start color here for this, so we could actually match. We could use our little eyedropper here, and we can match the color in the brick here if we wanted to make it look like it's that color. We could darken it a bit if we wanted to give it a bit more of a, no, that doesn't look so good. We could darken it kind of like that a little bit. So it looks like it's actually the brick material that's falling. We could also change this to a random between 2 colors. So then we could say maybe between here, and we could go to a, let's eyedropper the main color. Let's maybe eyedropper the darker color in the edge there. I think maybe I like that a little bit better. So that is now giving me some more variety. Let's go back to this color here and brighten it up just a bit. Maybe even brighten it up a bit more. Anyway, this is all a matter of taste, so I might do something like that. And we can just have it pick some random colors. Maybe lighten up this darker color just a tinge, so it's not quite so many different colors. Okay, so maybe something like that. And the other thing I might like to do is get a little bit of spin going on these objects here. So let's see if we can make them spin a little bit here. So let's look over here and find rotation. We could do rotation by speed. Let's maybe see what we do with that. So we can rotate them. So now they're rotating a little bit. We can do again a random between two constants. So maybe we do like a negative rotation and a positive. So now they should be rotating different ways. And let's see if we turn that up a little bit to like maybe a 90 and a negative 90. Let's see what that looks like. So now we're getting a little bit of rotation in there. They're rotating a little bit as they come down, and that gives us a little bit more randomness coming off of the bricks. Alright, so I think I like that okay for now. So again, there's so many things you can do inside of this particle system. It's pretty much your imagination is the limit these days, but we're just kind of making something simple here, and I think that works pretty well. And I think that's probably enough particles that we're spitting out. Okay, so now that we have our particle system, let's rename this. Let's just call this our explosion, we'll call it. Alright, and then let's make this into a prefab, because we're going to want to instantiate these in whenever we break a brick. So let's drag this down into our prefab folder. And now I have it down here, and it's got like its master copy all saved out how I like. So the one out here in the scene, we're going to delete that from the scene. This one down here, now we want to make sure we turn off looping, because we want it just to happen once and stop. It's set to play on awake, so as soon as I create one of these, it's going to automatically play its explosion. Alright, and then the only thing we have to do now is instantiate these when we hit a brick with the ball. So to make the instantiation happen, first we need to go into our ball script here, and we need to make a variable that can hold a reference to our prefab. So we're going to make a public transform, and we'll just call this explosion. And then down here, where we know we have hit a brick, so in our onCollision enter 2D, we know we've hit a brick because the tag matched up. Before we destroy that brick, we're going to instantiate an explosion in its place. So to do that, we would say instantiate, and then instantiate needs the object we want it to create, and that's our explosion. And then we have to give it a position. So the position we want is the position of this brick we just hit. So that's known as other. And we're going to go to the transform of the other object, that brick, and we're going to get its position. And then we also want to give it a rotation. So we can also say other transform rotation. Alright, so this will cause a explosion, which will hook into our explosion prefab, to be created in the position of the brick and rotated the same as the brick is rotated. After we do that, we'll go ahead and destroy the brick, and so it'll kind of look like the brick disappears and the explosion takes its place. So we'll save that. Out in Unity here, then we have to go to our ball. We have to fill in our explosion variable here with our explosion prefab, so we'll drag that out and drop it in. So now the script knows what it's making. So when we play here and we hit a brick, we should get an explosion. There we go. So every time we hit a brick, we are getting an explosion, and that's kind of nice. Alright, one thing to notice is every time we're making an explosion, we're getting one over here in our hierarchy, the explosion clones. You can see them here in the scene view as well. So that's kind of the downside to instantiating an explosion each time we hit a brick. We're going to end up with a bunch of these kind of cluttering up our scene. So what we're going to do next is we're just going to make sure these remove themselves after they're done. so that they don't stay here in the hierarchy or in the computer memory. So let's stop play mode and go back into our script. So to clean up those explosions, what we can do here is we can store this new explosion that we're making in a variable temporarily. So let's make a transform variable. We'll call it new explosion, and we'll set that equal to the instantiate. I picked the transform variable here because we're instantiating explosion. Explosion is a transform, so we want the same types to match up. Alright, so now that we're capturing the explosion in our new explosion variable, we can destroy new explosion, and we have to give it the game object. So we'll say .gameObject, and if we put a comma here, we can put in a optional amount of time in seconds that we want it to wait before it destroys it. So let's give it 2.5 seconds. And now it should destroy these explosions and clean them up out of our hierarchy. So back out in Unity here. Let's test it out. So we should see them popping out of the hierarchy here now. So you notice that one of them just popped out. So yes, they're popping out of the hierarchy here about 2.5 seconds after they've been made. There's none in the hierarchy now, so they are cleaning up themselves, and that just keeps them from cluttering things up. Alright, so now we have the explosions all taken care of. And we are instantiating those and dropping them in. So this is a good place to stop this video here. We have gotten the bricks into our scene, and we've set up a level using the bricks, and we have added in the ability for the ball to destroy the bricks and do a little particle explosion and all that fun stuff. So in the next video, we'll start adding in lives and score into our game and see where it takes us. As always, hope you've been enjoying the videos and finding them helpful. If you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave those in the comments below. I try to answer those as quickly as I can. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.